Throughout its history, Poland has struggled against foreign incursions. As such, the extent of its power shifted enormously. In the 17th century, the country prevailed as a major power in Eastern Europe. Yet, by the end of the 18th century, it had completely disappeared from the map. Poland survived only in memory and language before it emerged again a century later. This experience of national disasters has shaped the Polish mindset with a sense of suspicion and anxiety. As such, policymakers in Warsaw are desperately searching for a global power that can guarantee the sovereignty of Poland. Subsequently, the security dilemma is also laying the groundwork for the country to emerge as a regional power. My name is Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Check out our fundraising page at patreon.com/Caspian Report for ways to help support our channel. Since the formation of the earliest form of governance, the primary task of any government has been to ensure its independence and sovereignty over its territory. This objective transcends all other social, cultural, and economic issues. This harsh reality is particularly true in Warszawa's case. The Republic of Poland is situated between the Baltic Sea in the north and the Carpathian and Tatra Mountains in the south. The sea and the mountains provide some geographic security, but the lands to the east and west are flat. The terrain, which is part of the North European plain, offers no protection against a land invasion. In this context, a powerful Germany or Russia poses an existential threat to Poland, since the strategic needs of Berlin and Moscow dictate that the countries must push towards the east or west respectively. This puts Poland right in the middle of a geopolitical struggle. Historically, the outcome has been met with disaster. If it wasn't the complete partition of the Polish state, it was Napoleonic France, Nazi Germany, or Stalinist Russia that dominated over Poland. In essence, due to its fragile location and past experience, Poland's destiny has been mostly dictated by outside forces. This, of course, is not a viable long-term arrangement. Hence, the geopolitical needs of Warsaw revolve around the preservation of the Polish identity and independence. However, since Poland lacks the resources to oppose Germany or Russia, Warsaw has instead sought to align its interests with that of Berlin or Moscow. Policymakers in Poland experimented with this strategy during the Cold War. At the time, Warsaw was forced to ally with Moscow but ended up as a Soviet client state. Then in the 1990s, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Poland shifted its fealty and joined Western institutions such as NATO and the European Union. These organizations brought Poland and Germany into the same political entity, which diminished the potential threat from Berlin. Over the past decade, Poland used the EU funds to shift its economic orientation towards Germany. However, a geo-economic side effect was that it also transformed the Polish economy as part of the German supply chain. Basically, Germany determined the economic progress in Poland. This became evident following the financial crisis of 2008. As the global demand for German exports decreased, demands for Polish commodities decreased as well. So, just as the Soviet-Polish alliance, the German-Polish alliance effectively turned Poland into a dependency of its larger neighbor. The financial crisis of 2008 and the revival of Russian geopolitics presented a wake-up call for the Polish leadership to reevaluate the long-term prospects of the Western institutions. The truth of the matter is that even though NATO and the EU form coherent blocs with a unified policy on Russia, in practice, however, Western Europe has no appetite in a renewed Cold War with Russia. For instance, Germany, France, and the UK have more pressing priorities, and so have left the Russian policy in the hands of the nations in Eastern Europe. Thus, the current state of affairs is such that Western European members of NATO want a more passive organization, while Poland and Romania argue for more NATO pressure on Russia. From the Polish point of view, the split of interests of Western and Eastern Europe is evidence of the uncertain future of the EU and NATO. To that end, since maintaining the unity of NATO and the EU is beyond the capabilities of Warsaw, the Polish government is instead preparing to meet a resurgent Russia on different terms. Since 2011, Poland has taken steps to diversify away from Germany and the European Union and to increase trade with the United States. As such, American consumption of Polish commodities has grown by about 20%. This economic policy coincides with Warszaw's new geopolitical policy, which is to seek an outside power that can guarantee the Polish sovereignty. This policy is, in fact, the same strategy Poland pursued in the 1930s when it allied with France and Britain. The plan ultimately failed due to tactical execution, but the idea itself was sound. First, a military alliance must be of mutual interest. The security guarantor that comes to the aid of Poland must be geopolitically interested in preserving a balance of power in Europe. Second, a security guarantor serves as a deterrent against an attack, not as a liberator of occupied territories, meaning it must be technically possible to aid Poland. Only when these two conditions are met can the security guarantor honor its commitments. Today, the security guarantor in question is, of course, the United States. Since 1989, every Polish government has advocated for American military presence in Europe. However, to extract security guarantees from Washington, Warsaw must comply with the conditions of a military alliance. The first point is straightforward. Poland could provide the means to prevent Russia from restoring its influence in the former Soviet states. In addition to this, Warsaw has rendered assistance to Washington by participating in American wars. Polish troops have fought alongside American forces in Haiti, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Mali. Not because these distant battle spaces were threats to Poland, but because Warszaw's support could be used as a leverage to shape the behavior of Washington. However, to successfully receive security guarantees from the United States, Poland must make it technically viable. Meaning, in face of a foreign military invasion, the Polish armed forces must delay the incursion by a few months to buy time for the United States to respond. The thing is, Washington may have equal commitments to the NATO member states, but American military capabilities are more secure in Germany than in Poland. The US simply cannot instantly jump to action in Eastern Europe. Washington needs time to consider the situation, plan a response, and then implement a course of action. Depending on the location and adversary, an American military response ranges from a week to several months. So, for example, if Russia were to invade Poland through the flat terrain of the North European plain, the Polish military would need to hold out the Russian assault by several months to buy time for the US intervention. Currently, however, the Polish military simply lacks the ability to defend itself long enough. The task of buying time, however, falls upon Poland. Hence, the government has significantly increased defense spending, military personnel, and joint exercises in the last few years. This, of course, is just the start. Establishing a professional and efficient military takes years, if not decades. Besides the American reassurance policy, Poland is also seeking to form a coalition of countries in East Europe that hold similar anti-Russian views. As a starting point, Poland has used the Visegrad Group to support specific economic policies within the EU. In the coming years, Poland could seek to expand the role of the Visegrad Group and form a coherent anti-Russian bloc in Eastern Europe. Democratic traditions requires governments to balance short-term results and approval ratings with feasible long-term objectives. So the process of a unified East European coalition will be long and difficult, but the common geopolitical interests in the region demand it. In pursuit of a regional coalition, Poland's foreign policy from 2007 to 2014 encouraged the expansion of the EU and NATO, especially to Ukraine, Moldova, the South Caucasus and the Balkans. This modern policy is in fact the Prometheanism doctrine, which was envisioned by the leaders of the Second Polish Republic, who, following the establishment of a Polish state in over a century, sought to weaken Moscow's influence by supporting nationalist and ethnic movements within the borders of the Russian Empire and later on the Soviet Union. The Prometheanism doctrine was partially realized with the breakup of the USSR, but policymakers in Warsaw believed that in order to ensure independence and prevent foreign occupation, the complete breakup of modern-day Russia is necessary. This is what the national interests of Poland dictate. As such, the Polish leadership has sought to use the resources of Western institutions as a geopolitical leverage against Russia. This plan, however, did not work out as Warsaw expected, since Western Europe does not share the Polish concerns. Nevertheless, buried underneath the political events and populist sentiment, the discrete echoes of the Prometheanism doctrine can still be witnessed. For instance, during the 1994 and 1999 hostilities in Chechnya, Poland expressed favorable attitudes towards the Chechen separatists. The government in Warsaw also supported the 2004 Orange Revolution and the 2014 Euromaidan Revolution in Ukraine, as well as the 2003 Rose Revolution and the 2008 South Ossetian conflict in Georgia. A more recent example can be traced back to 2015 when Poland signed a bilateral defense agreement with Ukraine, which provides for cooperation within the scope of defense industries of the two countries. In other words, the agreement seeks to ensure that the Ukrainian military develops according to NATO standards, which ensures Warshaw's soft power influence over Kiev. In geopolitical terms, Poland's anti-Russian activities make sense, but Warsaw cannot match Moscow's influence in the former Soviet states. It will take years before Poland can make even a dent in the affairs of Eastern Europe, yet by then its fortunes will reverse. By 2020, Poland will experience a profound demographic crisis. The country has the second fastest aging population in Europe, and demographic projections indicate that the Polish population will decline from 38 million in 2017 to 33 million in 2050 to 22 million by the end of the century. The demographic crisis will limit the potential of Poland. Still, however, the country has no choice but to find ways to preserve its sovereignty and independence. Over time, Warshaw's geopolitical initiatives under the Prometheanism doctrine could turn Poland into a regional power. Since Warsaw is trapped between Berlin and Moscow, and since it cannot rely on the European Union or NATO, it must therefore seek to extract security guarantees from Washington. Forging a long-term alliance with the United States will require the military buildup of Polish armed forces and the participation of Poland in American wars. But if the leadership in Warsaw is not cautious, like many countries before it, Poland could unintentionally end up as an American client state. This was a Caspian report by me, Shirvan. Special thanks to our contributors on Patreon who made this report possible. YouTube's consistent demonetization has reduced our ad revenues by 80%, so it really is Patreon that keeps us operational. And if you have the means and you want to support Caspian Report to remain independent, please check out our fundraising page on patreon.com/Caspian Report. For now, thank you for your time and Sarol.